Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In an earlier video, we looked at some Grand Prix that never happened, and today we'll be looking at some driver moves that never happened. We've seen many drivers connected to teams that they didn't drive for over the years, and some of these, had they happened, could have had major effects on how the sport's history played out. I have 10 of these potential driver moves from over the years, and I'll try to explore what effect they could have had on Formula One history. Before getting into it though, if you enjoy the video, then please give it a like and share the video, and if you want to see more similar content, then you can subscribe to the channel. The first one we'll be looking at is Alberto Ascari to Mercedes. After winning back-to-back titles with Ferrari in 1952 and 1953, Ascari wanted to be paid more than Ferrari was willing to offer and put himself on the market to change teams. He was connected to all the major manufacturers, with the most interesting one being Mercedes. Mercedes was due to come into Formula One in the middle of the 1954 season, and many were expecting great things from them. He instead opted to stay with an Italian manufacturer with a new Lancia project. While the Lancia project had potential, it was unreliable for Ascari, and he retired from all 3 races he entered with it before dying in a sports car accident at a test in Monza in 1955. Mercedes, however, went to be the dominant team of 1954 and 1955 before pulling out of motor racing following the tragic Le Mans crash. If Ascari had chosen Mercedes, it could have potentially set up a fascinating battle, as also driving for Mercedes in 1954 was Juan Manuel Fangio. Fangio and Ascari were widely recognized as the 2 best drivers at the time, and putting them together in the dominant car could have led to some fascinating championship battles. In 1955, more intrigue could have been added with a young Stirling Moss on the team if they still would have been willing to add him. Had this happened, a Fangio-Ascari battle at Mercedes could have potentially been one of the first true inter-team rivalries in the World Championship era, creating some historic championship battles in the mid-50s. The next one we'll be looking at is Emerson Fittipaldi to Brabham. For the 1974 season, Fittipaldi was believed to have a few options presented to him. First, he could have remained where he was at Lotus. He also could switch to McLaren, which is the move he would end up making, and he also supposedly had an offer to drive for a new team for Roger Penske. He also had another rumored alternative, which was at one point reportedly the most likely, and that was a switch to Brabham with massive backing from Marlboro. Had he taken the Brabham option, he would have placed himself in a team that was improving greatly after a few difficult seasons, and been in a car that won 3 times in 1974. Brabham won 2 more races in 1975 and placed second in the Constructors' Championship, but despite this, they were never truly title contenders in the mid-70s. Fittipaldi and the team with the extra Marlboro backing could have perhaps pushed them a bit further up the grid to the point in which they were title contenders, but I think it's unlikely it would have proved to be much better than a switch to McLaren was. At McLaren, he won the title in 1974 and then finished second in 1975, before moving to his family team in 1976. Next up, we have Didier Pironi to Renault. With Renault looking to expand to 2 cars for the first time in 1979, they needed to sign a driver alongside Jean-Pierre Jabouille, and one of the first places they looked to was the French driver Pironi, who had just had a solid debut season at Tyrrell. The 2 discussed a deal, but in the end Tyrrell refused to let him out of his contract, and he stayed with the team for another year. Pironi eventually joined Ligier in 1980, where he became a Grand Prix winner for the first time, and then switched to Ferrari in 1981, where he was the favorite for the title late into the 1982 season until he suffered career-ending injuries in a practice crash at the German Grand Prix. Renault, on the other hand, became a race winner in 1979 and were contenders at the front of the grid for a couple of years, but the cars were also woefully unreliable, making it hard to achieve consistently good results. However, Pironi likely would have won a few races with the team over the next couple of seasons with them, and had he remained with Renault through 1983, assuming he doesn't have the same accident, it's possible that he could have contended for the championship in a Renault then. However, in his way may have been teammate Alain Prost in what could have been an interesting inter-team battle between the 2 young French drivers. How the rest of his career may have played out is hard to predict, but Pironi was talented enough that he would have likely remained at the front of the field as long as he wanted to race. Now we'll take a look at Alain Prost potentially at Ligier, and this one actually had potential 2 times, with the 2 occurrences being over a decade apart. The first one took place back in 1979 when Patrick Depailler broke both his legs in a hang gliding accident between the Monaco and the French Grand Prix, leaving Ligier in need of a replacement. Prost was one of the drivers considered, but he was inexperienced, and the team opted to go with veteran driver Jacky Ickx instead. While Ligier started out the year strong, winning 3 of the first 5 races, they started to fall behind in the second half of the year, and Prost would have joined the team had this happened. However, based on how he performed early in his career, it's likely that he would have impressed and potentially could have scored some podiums along the way. Perhaps this could have led to him being retained by Ligier for the 1980 season instead of debuting with McLaren. Ligier won twice in 1980, giving Prost a potential race-winning car for his first full season, and after that his career may have played out similarly, with Renault looking for a young French driver to lead the team in 1981. The second time Prost was connected to Ligier was in 1992. After being let go by Ferrari towards the end of the 1991 season, he considered taking a seat at Ligier and tested with the team, but decided not to sign, thinking the car wouldn't be competitive enough. Ligier's performance has proved Prost correct, and while he would have likely outperformed his would-be teammate Thierry Boutsen, Prost probably would have been only finishing towards the tail end of the points positions with a potential odd podium or two. As it worked out, Prost instead got a Williams seat in 1983 and won a 4th championship there before retiring. One of the big stories heading into 1982 was the comeback of double world champion Niki Lauda. He was connected to many teams including Brabham, but in the end decided to make his return to McLaren. Brabham supposedly didn't end there though, looking to lure drivers out of retirement. Bernie Ecclestone, looking for some headlines himself, was on the lookout for another previous world champion to join his team, and one of the offers he supposedly made was to Jackie Stewart. Despite receiving a very large offer, Stewart wasn't interested in returning to Formula One. Despite the talent Stewart had, I think this may have ended up being the best decision for him. It had been nearly a decade since he last raced in the sport, and he would have been 42 years old at the start of the season. Under these circumstances, a comeback probably would have been very difficult. While Lauda's comeback was successful, which included him winning the 1984 championship, he only sat out 3 years and was 33 years old. Had the comeback worked out for Stewart, though, it would have set up an interesting pairing at Brabham with him and Nelson Piquet, and in 1983, if he was still driving, he would have been driving the same car that gave Piquet his second title. The next one I have is Mika Hakkinen to Benetton. Hakkinen was in the middle of his 3rd full season with McLaren in 1996 and had yet to win a race, so it made sense that he'd explore some possible options for 1997 to improve his chances. Rumors connected him with Benetton, but in the end, Hakkinen returned to McLaren once again. Staying with McLaren would turn out to be the right move, as he won his first race at the end of the 1997 season, and then won back-to-back championships in 1998 and 1999, before losing out a fight for the title with Michael Schumacher in 2000. Had Hakkinen left for Benetton, he may have scored a win or two in 1997, but he would have joined a team that was on the decline. 97 was the last year that they won a race, but starting in 98, they dipped in the midfield and then further back, in the coming years only achieving an occasional podium, which would have put Hakkinen in a position in which he surely would not have been able to compete for a title. While Hakkinen may have still impressed with Benetton, it's hard to see him finding his way back up to a championship-winning team, meaning it's likely that he would have ended his career without winning a championship, and gave another driver the opportunity to see what they could do with the outstanding McLaren cars of the late 90s. Sometimes it's the moves you don't make which turn out to be the best ones. The next one I have really wouldn't have changed much in Formula One history, but it's one I find interesting nonetheless, and that would be Pedro Diniz to Ferrari. Many associate him with being a subpar pay driver, so it may be surprising that he was once rumored to be considered for a seat at Ferrari. The team was looking for options to replace Eddie Irvine to be Michael Schumacher's teammate for 2000, and Diniz was supposedly one of them. He struggled in his early Formula One days, but over the years had turned himself into a somewhat respectable driver that would occasionally put in some decent drives. Ferrari ended up hiring Rubens Barrichello, and had Diniz gotten the seat, he would have been the number 2 driver to Schumacher, so a title challenge would surely not have happened, but he perhaps could have won a couple of races if he had stayed there for a few years. With a few wins to his name, maybe it could have at least changed the way that many think of Diniz today. We stay with Ferrari again for the next one, but this time the driver is Juan Pablo Montoya, as during the mid-2000s there were occasional rumors of Montoya making a switch there to partner Michael Schumacher. This would have been in place of Barrichello, and I think it would have been hard to see a personality such as Montoya holding the seat instead, as Montoya and Schumacher were not exactly the best of friends during their time in Formula One. If the move ever was made, though, it certainly would have made for an interesting dynamic within the team to follow from the outside, as it would be hard to see Montoya accepting the role of a number 2 driver and would surely have been doing everything possible to take the fight to Schumacher. Montoya was certainly a quick driver, so there definitely would have been days that he would have been able to beat Schumacher. However, Montoya later said a Ferrari switch was something he never really considered because of Schumacher being there, but the rumors at the time were definitely out there. Recently, I did a video on 5 teammate pairings I would have liked to have seen, and while I didn't include Montoya and Schumacher, I think it could have been as interesting to follow as any of the ones that I did include, but at the same time I feel it certainly would have ended in tears. Back in 2004, when Lewis Hamilton was a McLaren Jr., he almost left McLaren and joined Williams. Hamilton, who was in his first season of Formula 3, didn't want to repeat it for a second year in 2005, and along with his dad, he explored the option of moving to Williams along with BMW to help support his junior career. According to Patrick Head, Williams was interested in signing Hamilton, but in the end had to turn it down after BMW didn't show any interest in supporting Hamilton at the time, and Head said that Williams alone wasn't in position to finance Hamilton's career. As we know, Hamilton stayed with McLaren and repeated Formula 3, and eventually made it to Formula 1 in 2007 and has gone on to an incredibly successful career. Had BMW offered funding to Hamilton, it could have turned out very differently though. 2005 turned out to be a difficult season for Williams, and at the end of the year BMW left and the team went on a decline from front runner to midfielder. The question, though, is would Hamilton have stayed with Williams once BMW left, or left again and potentially went to the BMW Sauber program? Perhaps he could have debuted in 2006 instead of 2007, but in either of these cases he wouldn't have had a race-winning car for his rookie season. BMW Sauber would have been a better option of the two at the time, as they would run at the front in 2007 and 2008, but the team struggled in 2009 before BMW pulled their support at the end of the year. It's hard to predict exactly how things would have turned out for Hamilton if he had started his career this way, but he would have no doubt impressed during these years and made his way to one of the big teams over the coming seasons. Perhaps, though, somewhere there's an alternate reality where instead of eventually switching to Mercedes from McLaren in 2013, he instead switches to somewhere like Ferrari or Red Bull, or maybe even back to McLaren in the early 2010s, which could have drastically changed modern Formula 1 history. For the final one I have for this video, it's Nico Rosberg joining McLaren. After Fernando Alonso left McLaren following 2007, the team needed a new driver to pair alongside Hamilton after his impressive rookie season. One of McLaren's top choices was Nico Rosberg, and they reportedly made a massive offer to buy out his contract from his then current team Williams, but Williams refused to let them. Instead, McLaren would bring in Heikki Kovalainen, who struggled there for 2 years before he was let go and replaced by Jenson Button. Had McLaren been able to bring in Rosberg, history certainly could have played out a bit differently. We all know the rivalry the two had at Mercedes from 2014 to 2016, but this could have played out years earlier at McLaren instead. McLaren was looking to move on from the difficult relationship between Hamilton and Alonso, and replacing it with what could have turned into another difficult relationship of Hamilton and Rosberg could have made things very complicated within the team. However, I think it's also possible that the timing of it could have made it so things wouldn't have gotten as heated between the two drivers at McLaren. They were both younger, and while McLaren did win the championship in 2008 in the hands of Hamilton, the car was not as dominant as the Mercedes cars they would drive together in 2014 to 2016. Instead of fighting for the championship solely between themselves, they would also have Ferraris and BMW Saubers in the mix as well fighting them, so the situation would have been a bit different. Had things gotten heated between them, though, then they probably don't end up being paired together at Mercedes, meaning that one of the two would have been left out of driving some of the best cars in modern Formula 1 history. So, there are 10 driver moves that never happened over the years. There's obviously numerous other ones that I didn't mention, so let me know if you'd like to hear more potential driver moves that never happened in the future. As for these 10, let me know which ones you would have liked to have seen the most and how you think some of these could have turned out. Thanks for watching.